The 13 crows were not in the report. That's what I keep coming back to. Not the sky at dusk, not the children's handwriting, not the room in the East Wing. The crows. 13 of them, on the telephone wire outside room 6, every evening at 6:47 p.m. Arranged in the same order. Facing the same direction. The same 13 birds. The district's incident summary mentions none of it. My formal separation agreement mentions none of it. But Carla Dunham's journal, the one I found taped inside the bathroom ceiling of the teacher's cottage, mentions them on every page. I need to explain how I ended up in Galton. I graduated from the University of Missouri with a secondary education degree in May of 2023. I'd spent my student teaching semester in a well-funded suburban district outside Kansas City where the biggest daily challenge was convincing 16-year-olds to stop checking their phones during Hamlet. I was 23. I believed in formative assessment. I believed in backward design. I believed that every student could learn, and that the right teacher in the right classroom could prove it. My loan servicer believed in monthly payments of $1,142. So when the Kansas Rural Educator Incentive Program offered me a 2-year contract with full loan forgiveness and a subsidized housing unit, I applied within 20 minutes of reading the email. The placement came 6 weeks later. Galton, Kansas. Unified School District 412. Population somewhere between 400 and 600 depending on who was doing the counting and whether they included the agricultural workers who came in for harvest season. One consolidated school building, grades K through 12, built in 1974 and expanded once in 1991. I would be teaching 9th and 10th grade English language arts, plus one section of 8th grade reading intervention. The contract included a furnished cottage on school district property, located approximately a quarter mile behind the school building on a parcel the district had acquired decades ago. The cottage was a single-story clapboard structure, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a narrow kitchen, and a living room with windows that faced the school. It had been continuously occupied by placement teachers since 2004. I would be the 11th. My hiring coordinator at the KREIP office in Topeka was a woman named Janet Leong. During our final phone call before I drove west, she ran through the standard orientation. Rural isolation. Limited cell coverage. The nearest hospital was 43 minutes east in Hayes. The nearest target was an hour and 12 minutes. She told me to bring books, because the internet at the cottage was satellite-based and unreliable after weather events. Then she paused. "The community is wonderful," she said, in a tone that suggested she was choosing her next words carefully. "The families are very invested in the school. Very. You'll find that the students are well-behaved and the staff is supportive. But there are some cultural expectations around schedule and routine that you'll want to respect." I asked what she meant. "The school day ends early there. Earlier than you might be used to. Students are dismissed at 3:15, but the expectation is that all instruction wraps up by 3. After that, the custodial staff begins their process and the building transitions. You'll want to be out of the building by 4 at the latest, and back at the cottage before 5:30. Especially in the fall and winter months. The families are particular about the evenings." I wrote it down. I assumed it had something to do with farming schedules, harvest obligations, church activities. Maybe Wednesday night services. Maybe Friday night football. Rural communities organized around sunset the way cities organized around commuter traffic. It made sense. I thanked Janet and finished packing. The drive from Columbia, Missouri, to Galton took about 7 hours. I crossed into Kansas just after noon on a Saturday in late July. The land flattened. The sky expanded. I stopped for gas in a town called Wakini and ate a sandwich in my car while staring at a grain elevator that looked like it had been built during the Eisenhower administration. The road to Galton was a 2-lane state highway that eventually turned into a county road, and then into a road that my GPS stopped recognizing about 12 miles before I arrived. Galton appeared the way small Kansas towns do, slowly, then all at once. A water tower. A cluster of grain bins. A co-op. A church with white siding and no steeple. A post office the size of a garden shed. 2 blocks of residential housing, most of it modest and well-maintained. Then the school, which sat on the northern edge of town like a long, low bunker, its flat roof and tan brick facade somehow both institutional and lonely. I pulled up to the main entrance at 3:40 p.m. The parking lot was empty except for a single white pickup truck. A woman in her mid-50s was sitting on the concrete steps with a manila folder in her lap. She stood when she saw me and extended her hand before I'd fully closed my car door. Diane Oberfeld. I'm the principal. You must be Marcus. She was shorter than I'd expected from our phone calls. Wire-rimmed glasses. Short gray hair. A handshake that communicated decades of firm but measured authority. She walked me through the building at a pace that suggested we had somewhere to be. The school was clean, quiet, and well-organized. Classrooms on the left, administrative offices, and the library on the right, a cafeteria gymnasium at the far end. My classroom was room 6, at the end of the east hallway, with windows that faced the parking lot and the open prairie beyond it. The room had 30 desks arranged in rows, a whiteboard, a projector mounted to the ceiling, and a corkboard along the back wall covered in faded construction paper from the previous year. Your predecessor left everything in good order, Diane said, setting the manila folder on my desk. Curriculum maps, pacing guides, her lesson plan templates. There's also a building procedures manual in there. I'd encourage you to read it through before Monday. I asked about my predecessor. Diane said her name was Carla Dunham, that she'd completed her 2-year contract and moved back to Wichita, and that she'd been a fine teacher. She said it the way you describe a car that ran well, accurate, unemotional, complete. I asked if Carla had left any notes for me specifically. Anything informal, advice, suggestions. Diane's expression didn't change. Everything you need is in the folder. She drove me to the cottage in her truck. The quarter-mile distance felt longer than it should have because there was nothing between the school and the cottage except flat grass, a gravel path, and a single telephone wire strung between 3 wooden poles. The cottage itself was exactly as described, small, clean, furnished with the kind of solid, unremarkable furniture you find in church basements. The refrigerator had been stocked with basics. The bed was made. A welcome card from the PTA sat on the kitchen counter, signed by 19 families. Diane handed me 2 keys, one for the cottage, one for the school's east entrance, and pointed out the emergency numbers posted on the refrigerator. Then she checked her watch. It's 4:52, she said. I'm going to head home. I'd recommend you do the same, stay in for the evening, get settled. Sunrise is around 6:40 this time of year. I'll see you Monday morning, 7:15. She said it naturally. The way you'd tell someone to drive safe or call if you need anything. But she checked her watch first, and the recommendation to stay in for the evening landed with a specificity that didn't match its casual delivery. I spent the rest of Saturday unpacking and reading through Carla's folder. The curriculum materials were thorough. The pacing guides were well organized. The building procedures manual was 14 pages, single-spaced, and covered everything from fire drill protocol to copier access codes. Page 11 was titled, Schedule and Transition Expectations. The section was longer and more detailed than anything else in the manual. It laid out the daily schedule with a precision I hadn't encountered outside of a military academy. Morning access to the building, 6:45 a.m. Staff expected in classrooms by 7 a.m. Students begin arriving at 7:15 a.m. Instruction begins at 7:40 a.m. Instruction concludes by 3 p.m. Student dismissal at 3:15 p.m. Staff may remain in the building until 4 p.m. for planning and grading. The building must be fully vacated by 4:30 p.m. No exceptions. This schedule applies to all staff, including custodial, administrative, and contracted personnel. The next paragraph was underlined. Between the hours of 5 p.m. and 6:30 a.m., the building is in transition status. No personnel are authorized to enter the facility during transition hours. Keys issued to teaching staff do not operate the locks during transition hours. Questions regarding transition hour access should be directed to Principal Oberfeld. Below that, in smaller type. Evening activities in the cottage are at the teacher's discretion. It is recommended that exterior lighting be kept off after 8 p.m. and that windows facing the school remain curtained during transition hours. I read it twice. Then I read the rest of the manual, which returned to normal topics, photocopier maintenance requests, library checkout procedures, the process for requesting substitute coverage. Nothing else in the document had the same tone as page 11. Nothing else was underlined. I set the manual on the nightstand and went to bed. Outside, the Kansas night was enormous and silent. No traffic. No sirens. No neighbors' televisions bleeding through shared walls. Just wind, and a silence so deep it felt pressurized. I slept poorly. Not because of anxiety, I was excited to start, but because twice during the night I heard a sound I couldn't identify. A low, rhythmic tapping, almost mechanical, coming from the direction of the school. It lasted 4 or 5 minutes each time, then stopped. When I looked out the window, I couldn't see anything. The school was a dark shape against a darker sky. Monday morning. I arrived at the building at 6:48 a.m. Diane was already in her office. The custodian, a quiet man in his 60s named Earl, was mopping the cafeteria. 2 other teachers, Helen Pasternak, who taught elementary, and Doug Swain, who handled the upper school sciences, were in their respective rooms preparing for the day. Everyone was friendly. Everyone was professional. Everyone was already working when I walked in, and I got the distinct impression that no one had arrived later than 6:45. The students began filtering in at 7:15, and by 7:30, every seat in room 6 was filled. My first class was 22 ninth graders. They were clean, quiet, and attentive. They sat with their hands folded on their desks and their eyes forward, and when I introduced myself, several of them said, "Good morning, Mr. Harden," in a unison that felt practiced but not robotic. More like habitual. Like a reflex they'd developed over years of identical mornings. The day was smooth. Unremarkably, almost suspiciously smooth. Students transitioned between classes in orderly lines. Nobody talked in the hallways above a murmur. Nobody's phone went off. Nobody challenged an assignment or argued about a grade. My 10th graders were equally composed, and my 8th grade reading group, 6 students, all behind grade level, worked through their diagnostic assessment without a single complaint. At 2:55 p.m., I was mid-sentence when every student in my last period class simultaneously began packing their bags. Not rudely, there was no rustling or zipping or conversation. They simply closed their notebooks at the same moment, slid their materials into their backpacks, and sat with their hands folded again, looking at me. I checked the clock. 2:55 p.m. I still had 5 minutes of instructional time. "We've got a few more minutes," I said. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They just sat there, packed and ready. At 2:59 p.m., the intercom clicked. "Teachers, please conclude instruction. Students, please prepare for dismissal." By 3:01, room 6 was empty. By 3:12, the hallway was silent. By 3:15, the buses were pulling away from the front circle, and by 3:18, I was standing alone in the east hallway listening to the building settle into its afternoon quiet. I graded papers until 3:50. Then I gathered my things and walked toward the east exit. Earl was in the hallway with his mop and bucket. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. "Heading out?" "Yeah, just finishing up." He checked his watch. "Good. 4 o'clock comes fast." I thanked him and stepped into the late afternoon sun. The walk back to the cottage took about 6 minutes. The air was warm, the sky was enormous, and the only sound was the crunch of gravel under my shoes and the distant chatter of a meadowlark. I went inside, made dinner, read for an hour, and forgot to close the curtains on the window facing the school. At 7:14 p.m., I looked up from my book and saw lights on in the building. Not the overhead fluorescence. Something different. A pale, ambient glow coming from the windows of the east wing, my wing. Room 4, Room 5, Room 6. The light wasn't steady. It pulsed faintly, like something breathing. It would brighten for 3 or 4 seconds, then dim, then brighten again. The rhythm was slow and regular. I stood at the window for 11 minutes. At 7:25, the lights went off, all 3 rooms simultaneously, like someone had thrown a single switch. I closed the curtains. The next day, I mentioned it to Doug Swain during our shared planning period. He was a local, born in Galton, attended the school, came back to teach after getting his degree at Fort Hays State. I framed it casually. Something about leaving a light on, maybe the custodian forgot. Doug didn't look at me. He was organizing a tray of mineral samples, and his hands kept moving while he spoke. Earl doesn't forget things. I waited for more. The building does what it does at night. It's been that way since before I was born. You'll get used to it. Everybody does. He set down a piece of quartz and finally looked at me. His expression was patient, not unkind, but it carried a boundary I recognized from years of watching teachers shut down questions they couldn't answer. He wasn't going to explain further. He was telling me where the conversation ended. I let it end. But I didn't stop watching. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept a notebook. Every evening, I checked the school from the cottage window at 15-minute intervals between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. I documented what I saw. The lights appeared every night without exception. They were always in the east wing. They always began between 7:10 and 7:20 p.m. They always ended between 7:22 and 7:30 p.m. The pulse rate was consistent, approximately one full cycle every 8 seconds. On clear nights, I could sometimes see shadows moving behind the classroom windows, but the distance made it impossible to determine their shape or number. On September 14th, I saw something I hadn't seen before. A figure standing outside the building, near the east entrance, at 7:16 p.m. It was too far away and too dark to identify, but it appeared to be an adult, standing motionless, facing the windows. It remained there for the full duration of the light event. When the lights went off, the figure was gone. I marked the date. I kept watching. On September 18th, I tried something. At 4:25 p.m., 5 minutes before the building was supposed to be fully vacated, I went back to room 6. I'd left a stack of essays on my desk, or at least that's what I told myself. The hallway was empty. Earl's mop bucket sat outside the cafeteria, but Earl was nowhere in sight. The east wing was silent. I opened the door to room 6. Everything was in order. The essays were on my desk. The desks were in their rows. The whiteboard was clean. The windows showed the parking lot, the gravel path, the cottage in the distance. But the room was warm. Not warm the way a room gets when it's been closed up on a September afternoon. Warm the way a room gets when it's been occupied. The air had weight to it. It smelled faintly of something I couldn't place, not unpleasant, but organic. Like pressed flowers, or old paper, or the inside of a wooden drawer that hasn't been opened in years. I grabbed the essays and left. In the hallway, I ran into Diane. She was standing near the east exit with her keys in her hand. She didn't look angry. She looked like someone who had been expecting me. It's 4:28, Marcus. I know. I just needed to grab something. The building transitions at 4:30. You know that. I do. I'm leaving now. She held the door open for me. We walked into the parking lot together. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. The message was the precision itself. That night, the lights in the east wing came on at 7:11 p.m. They were brighter than I'd ever seen them. The pulse was faster, one cycle every 5 seconds instead of 8. At 7:14, I counted 13 crows on the telephone wire between the second and third poles. They were spaced evenly, all facing the school. At 7:19, the lights went off. The crows remained for another 4 minutes. Then they left, one at a time, at intervals so regular I could have set a metronome to them. I wrote it all down. The following Monday, I found a note in my school mailbox. It was handwritten on a sheet of yellow legal paper, folded twice. No signature. She watches from room 6. She has been watching since before you. She will watch after you. Do not watch back. I showed it to no one. I put it in my notebook. October came. The days shortened. The shift in light was dramatic. By mid-October, sunset was before 7 p.m., which meant the east wing lights were activating in full darkness. They were easier to see now, and harder to ignore. The pulsing had developed a secondary rhythm, a faster flicker nested inside the slow breathing cycle, like a heartbeat developing a murmur. The crows were there every night. Always 13. Always the same wire. I started photographing them with my phone, zooming in as far as the camera would allow. On October 9th, I reviewed the photos from the previous 2 weeks side by side. The birds were not just arranged in the same order. They were the same birds. I could match them by markings: a white patch on the left wing of the third crow, a crooked tail feather on the seventh, a slightly smaller body on the 11th. Identical, every night. I began to pay closer attention to my students. Not to their behavior, that remained impeccable, but to their writing. In my 9th grade class, I had assigned a personal narrative essay. The prompt was open: write about a moment that changed how you saw the world. I expected the usual adolescent fare: a grandparent's death, a move to a new town, a sporting event. What I got was different. 17 of 22 students wrote about the same thing. Not the same event, the same feeling. They described a moment, usually at dusk, when they became aware of something in the school that was aware of them. None of them used the word ghost or spirit or haunted. They didn't frame it as supernatural. They wrote about it the way you'd write about weather. A fact of their environment. Something that had always been there. A girl named Lila Marsh wrote, "There is a woman in the school who stays after we leave. She is not a teacher. She has always been there. My mother says she was there when she was a student. My grandmother says she was there too. We don't talk to her and she doesn't talk to us. She just watches. That is the rule and we all know it." A boy named Corey Trask wrote, "At night the building breathes. You can feel it from our house if you put your hand on the ground. My dad says the school is alive because of her and that's why it never falls apart. He said if she left we would have to leave too because the town wouldn't work anymore." I sat at my desk with those essays spread out in front of me for a long time. The clock read 3:42 p.m. I had 48 minutes before the building transitioned. I went to Diane's office. She was filing papers. I closed the door behind me and placed 3 of the essays on her desk without comment. She read them. Her expression didn't change. "They're good writers," she said. "You're doing well with them." Diane. Marcus. 17 students wrote about the same thing. A woman in the school. A woman who stays after everyone leaves. A woman who watches. Diane removed her glasses and set them on the desk. "And you'd like me to tell you what?" "I'd like you to tell me what's happening in this building after 4:30. She was quiet for a long time. Through her office window, I could see the parking lot, the buses idling, the students filing out in their orderly lines. "The school has been here since 1974, Diane said finally. "This town has been here since 1889. But something has been on this land for longer than either. The building was constructed around it. Not on top of it, around it. The original school board minutes from 1973 reference a site condition that required accommodation in the architectural program. The east wing was designed with specific dimensions, specific window placements, specific materials. It was built to be occupied during hours when we are not here." I asked who occupied it. "I don't know what she is, Marcus. Nobody does. The families who founded this town understood the arrangement. We use the building during the day. She uses it at night. The schedule exists to maintain separation. The transition hours are the buffer. As long as we honor the schedule, the arrangement holds. And if someone doesn't honor it..." Diane put her glasses back on. "In 52 years, no one hasn't." That wasn't true. I knew it wasn't true because I had found Carla Dunham's journal. I found it on October 22nd, a Tuesday. The bathroom in the cottage had a drop ceiling, the kind with removable foam tiles. One of the tiles above the toilet had been shifted slightly, maybe by water damage, maybe by age, maybe on purpose. I pushed it aside and found a gallon-sized Ziploc bag containing a composition notebook, a USB flash drive, and a folded note on lined paper. The note said, "For whoever is next. Please read this before you do anything else. CD." Carla Dunham's journal covered her entire 2-year placement. The first 3 months read like mine: the smooth students, the clean building, the precise schedule, the lights in the East Wing. She had made the same observations I had. The pulsing. The warmth in the room. The crows. But in her 4th month, Carla had done something I hadn't done. She had gone back. November 17th. A Sunday night. She had walked to the school at 7:15 p.m. with a flashlight and her phone. The east entrance key, as advertised, didn't work, but a window in the gymnasium, on the west side of the building, had a broken latch that Earl had reportedly been meaning to fix for years. Carla climbed through it. Her journal entry for that night was 12 pages long. Most of it was calm, almost clinical. She described the hallways as warmer than they should have been, with the same organic scent I had noticed. The overhead lights were off, but the East Wing was illuminated by the same pale glow visible from outside. She walked toward it. Room 4 was empty. Room 5 was empty. Room 6, her room, and now mine, was occupied. She wrote, "There is a woman sitting at my desk. She is facing the window. She is not translucent or glowing or any of the things you would expect. She looks solid. She looks real. She is wearing a dress that I think is gray or light blue, but the light in the room makes it hard to tell. Her hair is dark and pulled back. She is writing something. Her hand moves across the surface of the desk, but I can't see a pen or paper. She is writing on the desk itself, or on something I can't perceive." Carla stood in the doorway for 7 minutes. She knew because she was recording on her phone. The woman did not look up. Did not acknowledge her. Did not stop writing. Then, at 7:22 p.m., the woman stopped. She placed her hands flat on the desk. She turned her head toward the door. Carla wrote, "She looked at me. She looked at me and I understood something. Not words. Not a message. A recognition. She knew I was there and she knew what I was. I was the daytime version of her. I was the person who sat in that chair when she couldn't. I was her replacement, or she was mine. We were 2 shifts of the same position and she was acknowledging the handoff." Carla left the building through the same window. She went back to the cottage. She didn't sleep. Over the next 3 months, Carla returned to the school 11 more times. Each entry grew longer. The woman was always in room 6. She was always writing. She never spoke. But with each visit, Carla noticed changes, in the room, in herself. The room changed first. On her 3rd visit, Carla found that the desks had been rearranged into a circle. On her 5th visit, there were words on the whiteboard, not in English, not in any language she could identify, but structured like sentences, with spacing and punctuation she almost recognized. On her 7th visit, the corkboard at the back of the room was covered in drawings that looked like they had been made by children, but the subjects were wrong: architectural cross-sections of the school, geological strata beneath the foundation, a map of something that might have been the town as seen from below. The changes in Carla were slower. She described a growing difficulty concentrating during daylight hours. Her lesson plans became harder to write. Her handwriting changed, she noticed it in her own journal, a gradual shift toward more angular, compressed letter forms that she didn't recognize as her own. She started losing time in the late afternoon. She would be grading papers at 3:30 and then suddenly it would be 4:15 and she'd be standing at the window of room 6, looking out at the cottage, with no memory of how she'd gotten there. On February 3rd of her second year, Carla wrote, "I think she is learning from us. Not the students, us. The teachers. Each one who comes. She is studying how we teach and she is practicing at night. The writing on the desk is not a message. It is a lesson plan. She is preparing to teach something. I don't know what. I don't know to whom." On March 15th, I can hear her when I'm in the cottage now. Not her voice. Her writing. The sound of a hand moving across a surface. It comes through the wall. It comes through the floor. It's in the foundation. On April 2nd, I tried to leave. I packed my car at noon and drove east. I made it 11 miles before I turned around. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't compelled. I just understood that I hadn't finished my shift. The journal ended on May 30th, 4 days before the end of the school year. The last entry was 3 sentences. She looked at me tonight and I understood the rest of it. There is no night shift and day shift. There is only one shift and we are taking turns being visible during it. I have been her the whole time. I put the journal down. It was 11:40 p.m. Outside, the cottage was silent. I went to the window and looked toward the school. The east wing was dark. I checked the telephone wire. 13 crows. Motionless. Facing the cottage. Facing me. I closed the curtain. I sat on the bed. I picked up the USB drive that had been in the bag with the journal. I plugged it into my laptop. The drive contained one folder. The folder contained 219 files. Each file was a scan of a single page, handwritten, on ruled paper, in a handwriting I didn't recognize. The pages were not in English. They were in the same script Carla had described seeing on the whiteboard. Structured like lesson plans. Organized sequentially, numbered in the upper right corner, with what appeared to be dates, but in a dating system I couldn't read. The 219th file was different. It was a scan of a page written in English, in Carla's handwriting. But the content was not Carla's. It read, "Classroom expectations for the incoming cohort. The transition is nearly complete. The day shift instructor has demonstrated sufficient retention to begin the bridging curriculum. Students will be assessed for readiness on the first evening of the fall term. Attendance will be taken by the new instructor upon arrival. The new instructor will be recognized by the following markers: male, mid-20s, assigned to room 6, arrived during a year when the crows number 13. Below that, in smaller handwriting, a note that might have been Carla's own. Marcus, I am sorry. She wrote this through me. I didn't know until I found it in my own notebook the next morning. I don't know what she is preparing them for. I don't know what the bridging curriculum is. But it is not for our students. It is for hers. And she has been waiting for a teacher who matches the description long enough to deliver it. Please, do not go inside at night. Do not let her look at you. Do not teach after sunset. If you feel your handwriting changing, leave immediately. Don't wait for the end of your contract." I closed the laptop. I sat in the silence of the cottage and listened. The wind had stopped. The night insects had stopped. Everything had stopped except a faint, rhythmic sound coming from beneath the floor. Not tapping. Writing. The sound of a hand moving across a surface, forming letters in a language I couldn't read, preparing a lesson I couldn't understand, for students I couldn't see. I checked the time. 12:03 a.m. I looked at my own notebook, the one I'd been keeping since September, the one filled with observations about lights and crows and pulse rates. I flipped to the most recent page. The bottom third of the page was filled with writing I didn't remember producing. Angular. Compressed. Structured like a lesson plan, numbered in the upper right corner, dated in a system I couldn't read. My handwriting. Her content. I should have left that night. I know that. I should have packed my car and driven east and never stopped until I reached a city with enough noise and light to drown out whatever was underneath that building. But it was after midnight, and the manual said transition hours ran until 6:30 a.m., and some part of me, the part that had been trained to follow procedures, to respect institutional schedules, to believe that the system had reasons even when it didn't explain them, that part told me to wait until morning. I waited. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table and watched my hands and made sure they didn't move. At 6:32 a.m., I walked to my car. I put the key in the ignition. It wouldn't start. I opened the hood. I'm not a mechanic, but even I could see that the battery cables had been disconnected. Not corroded, not worn, disconnected. Cleanly, deliberately, by someone who knew what they were doing. Earl's truck was already in the parking lot. I walked to the school. I found Diane in her office. I told her I needed to leave Galton. Today. She looked at me for a long time. Then she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a formal separation agreement, pre-printed, predated, with my name already typed into the relevant fields. The effective date was 2 weeks out. You can't leave in the middle of a term, Marcus. We don't have a substitute. The students need continuity. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. You fulfill your instructional obligations through the 14th. You vacate the cottage on the 15th. We'll have your battery cables reconnected by then. She said it without flinching. She said it like someone who had said it before. I taught for 13 more days. I followed the schedule. I left the building by 4 p.m. I kept my curtains closed. I did not look at the telephone wire. I did not open my notebook. But on the last day, November 14th, I arrived at room 6 for first period and found the desks rearranged in a circle. I hadn't done it. Earl hadn't done it. The configuration was identical to what Carla had described from her third night visit, but it was 7:35 in the morning and the students were filing in and sitting down in the circle without hesitation. Without surprise. Like this was the arrangement they had always expected. Lila Marsh sat in the chair at the front of the circle, the one facing the whiteboard. She had a notebook open on her lap. She was writing. Her hand moved in angular, compressed strokes that I recognized from my own notebook, from Carla's scanned pages, from the 219 lesson plans on the USB drive. "Good morning, Mr. Harden," the class said in unison. Lila looked up. She smiled. "We're ready," she said. "I taught my last class. I said goodbye to the students. I walked to the cottage, packed my car, and drove east. I did not stop in Wakini. I did not stop until I reached Kansas City, where I checked into a motel and slept for 14 hours. The district sent me a final paycheck 3 weeks later. Included in the envelope was a printed letter confirming the terms of my separation and a brief performance evaluation. Mr. Harden demonstrated professional competence and adherence to building procedures. His students showed measurable growth in all assessed standards. We wish him well in his future career. There was no mention of the East Wing. No mention of lights, crows, transition hours, or a woman in room 6. No mention of anything that happened after 4:30 p.m. I tried to access the USB drive again last month. The files were gone, not deleted, not corrupted. The drive was empty. Formatted. Clean. I still have Carla's journal. I still have my notebook. And in my notebook, the pages I don't remember writing now outnumber the pages I do. The handwriting is changing. Not reverting. It's moving forward, becoming more angular, more compressed, more structured, each entry looking more like the lesson plans on the scanned pages that no longer exist. I haven't taught since leaving Galton. I took a job at a bookstore in Lawrence. I work mornings only. I go home before 4 p.m. I keep my curtains closed. Last Tuesday, I found a composition notebook on my kitchen table. It was new, the plastic wrap was still on it. I don't remember buying it. On the first page, in handwriting that was mine but was also hers, was a single line. Room 6 is ready. The evening section has been approved. Your students are waiting. I looked out the window. My apartment faces east. 13 crows on the power line. Same markings. Same spacing. Same direction. I closed the curtain. The writing sound started again at dusk. It comes through the floor now, no matter where I am. Through concrete. Through subflooring. Through the foundation of a building 230 miles from Galton. I don't teach after sunset. But the lesson plans keep writing themselves. And last night, for the first time, I found one that was complete. Title page. Learning objectives. Assessment rubric. Student roster. 30 names I don't recognize. And one I do. Mine. Not in the instructor field. In the attendance list. The evening section has been approved. I don't know who's teaching it. But I think she's been ready for a very long time. And I think she's been ready for a very long time. I know how that sounds. I know the shape it takes when you read it, like a ghost story, like campfire nonsense, like something that belongs on a forum where people compete to see who can make strangers lose sleep. I understand the impulse to categorize it. I had the same impulse for weeks after I left Galton. I told myself it was stress. Isolation psychosis. The particular breed of loneliness that sets in when you live alone in a place where the nearest human sound is a quarter-mile away and the sky is so big it makes your own thoughts feel overheard. But categorization requires that the thing stop happening. And it hasn't stopped. The lesson plans are the most consistent element. I find them in the morning. Always in the morning, always on the kitchen table, always in the composition notebook I didn't buy. I've tried removing the notebook from the apartment. On November 29th, I drove it to a dumpster behind a Walgreens on Massachusetts Street and threw it in at 2:15 p.m. By 6 p.m., it was on my kitchen table again. Same notebook, I'd marked the inside cover with a ballpoint scratch to be sure. Same pages. Same angular handwriting. One new entry, dated in the system I can't read, with a notation in the margin that I can read, because it was in English. Materials cannot be separated from the instructor during an active term. I stopped trying to remove it after that. The content of the lesson plans is structured with a rigor I've never seen in any curriculum document, and I've seen hundreds. Each plan follows an identical template, a header with what I assume is a date and period number, a section labeled with a glyph that might mean objective, a longer section that appears to be procedural steps, and a closing section with what looks like an assessment prompt. The language is the same unidentifiable script from Carla's USB files, but certain words recur with a frequency that suggests a limited, purposeful vocabulary, closer to a technical manual than a literary text. I started logging the plans on December 3rd. Not transcribing them, I can't read them, but documenting their physical characteristics. Length. Number of sections. Margin notations. Any English words that appeared. By December 19th, I had documented 31 entries. The English marginalia were sparse but increasing. They appeared to be annotations, not part of the main text but commentary on it, as though someone were reviewing the plans and leaving notes in a language the reviewer understood. December 5th, pacing adjusted for new cohort. December 9th, foundational unit extended. Readiness variable. December 12th, attendance incomplete. Section requires full enrollment before progression. December 14th, Room 6 configuration confirmed. Awaiting instructor orientation. Every annotation was in my handwriting. Every one was written by a hand I don't remember moving. I went to a neurologist on December 20th, Dr. Sina Abadi, KU Medical Center. I didn't tell her about Galton or the notebook or the woman. I told her I was experiencing episodes of automatic writing, producing text I didn't remember composing, in handwriting that resembled but didn't match my own. I told her I was concerned about dissociative episodes. She ran a panel. EEG, MRI, standard neuropsych battery. Everything came back clean. No seizure activity. No lesions. No structural abnormalities. Cognitive function within normal limits. She prescribed a sleep study and a follow-up in 6 weeks. I didn't go to the follow-up. By then, the lesson plans had started including diagrams. The diagrams were architectural. Floor plans, cross-sections, elevation drawings. I recognized some of them immediately: Room 6. The East Wing. The hallway. But the drawings showed elements that didn't exist in the building I remembered. A staircase descending from the East Wing into a lower level. A series of rooms arranged in a circle below the foundation. A corridor connecting the sublevel to a larger space drawn in such detail that I could see individual seating positions, 30 of them, arranged in the same circle I'd seen when Lila Marsh and the others rearranged the desks on my last day. The sublevel rooms were labeled. Not in the unreadable script. In English. In my handwriting. Room A, receiving. Room B, assessment. Room C, instruction. Room D, demonstration. Room E, transition. And at the center, larger than the rest, with a double-walled perimeter drawn in heavier lines. Room F, completion. I have never seen a sublevel at the school in Galton. The building is a slab-on-grade structure. There is no basement. I confirmed this with the county assessor's online records: single-story, no subgrade construction, built 1974. The original architectural drawings are on file with the $412 district office. On January 8th, I called the district office. I told the secretary I was a former teacher doing research on school architecture in western Kansas and asked if I could get copies of the original construction drawings for the Galton School. She put me on hold for 4 minutes. When she came back, her voice had changed. Those records have been requested by another party and are currently unavailable. I asked when they'd be available. I can't give you a timeline. Is there anything else I can help you with? I asked who had requested them. I'm not authorized to share that information. I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the notebook. The most recent diagram, the one showing room F, had acquired a new annotation since the previous night. A single line, in English, in my hand. The architect and the instructor are the same position. You were not hired to teach. You were hired to build. I read it several times. I read it until the words stopped being words and became shapes, and then I read it again until they became words once more. Then I turned the page. The next page was a student roster. 30 names. 29 of them in the unreadable script. The 30th, at the bottom, in English. Marcus Harden. Below my name, a single check mark. The kind a teacher makes when recording attendance. Somebody had marked me present. January through March is a blur. Not because I've lost the memories, I have them, and they're precise, but because the period has the flattened, recursive quality of a dream in which you perform the same actions repeatedly and each repetition changes something small enough to miss. I went to work at the bookstore. I shelved inventory. I helped customers. I went home. I found new pages in the notebook. I documented them. I went to sleep. I woke up. I went to work. The changes were small. On January 14th, I noticed that the power line outside my apartment window, which had previously held only utility cables, now had a section of older wire running parallel to the main line, the same gauge and sag pattern as the wire between the poles near the Galton School. I checked with the apartment complex manager. She said the lines hadn't been modified in years. On January 22nd, I found a piece of chalk on my nightstand. White. Standard classroom chalk. I don't own chalk. The bookstore doesn't use chalk. The nearest chalkboard I know of is in the staff break room of a coffee shop 3 blocks away. On February 3rd, the 1-year anniversary of Carla's entry about the woman learning from the teachers, I woke at 3:47 a.m. to the sound of desks being moved. Furniture dragging across a floor. The sound was coming from below me. My apartment is on the 2nd floor. The unit below mine is a 1-bedroom occupied by an elderly woman named Dolores who goes to bed at 8 p.m. and has never, in 6 months of tenancy, made a sound I could hear through the floor. The dragging lasted 9 minutes. It stopped at 3:56 a.m. When I saw Dolores the next morning at the mailboxes, she looked rested and normal. I asked, as casually as I could, whether she'd heard any noise during the night. She shook her head. On February 11th, I came home from work and found the kitchen table had been moved. It was in the center of the room instead of against the wall. The 2 chairs were positioned at the table in a way that suggested 2 people sitting across from each other. On the table, the composition notebook was open to a new page. The page contained 2 columns. The left column was headed with a glyph. The right column was headed, in English, with Instructor Evaluation, Term 1. Below it, a rubric. 5 categories, each scored on a scale I couldn't read. 4 of the 5 categories had marks in them. The 5th was blank. Next to the 5th category, in English. Pending. Requires in-person observation. I closed the notebook. I moved the table back against the wall. I moved the chairs. I sat down and put my hands flat on the surface and held them there. The surface was warm. On February 25th, Doug Swain called me. I hadn't spoken to anyone from Galton since the day I left. I almost didn't answer, the area code was unfamiliar, and I'd been screening calls for weeks, but something made me pick up. Maybe the same something that made me turn around 11 miles outside of Galton. Doug's voice was careful. He asked how I was doing. He asked about the bookstore. He made small talk about the weather in Lawrence, which he seemed to know more about than someone in Galton should. Then he went quiet. Marcus, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. I waited. Have you been getting the pages? I didn't answer immediately. The fact that he knew about the pages meant that the pages were not unique to me. The fact that he was calling meant something had changed. Yes, I said. He exhaled. Okay. Okay. Listen. The new teacher, your replacement, her name is Andrea. She started in August. She's doing fine. Good teacher. The kids like her. She follows the schedule. But in October, she found Carla's journal. My stomach dropped. I left it in the ceiling. I should have taken it with me. Wouldn't have mattered. Carla left it there 3 times. Each time it came back. I thought about the notebook in the Walgreens dumpster. Andrea's further along than you were, Doug said. She's been going inside at night. How many times? I don't know. More than Carla. She goes 2, 3 times a week now. She says the woman talks to her. Talks. Not with words. With the lesson plans. Andrea reads them and the woman responds by changing the next one based on what Andrea understood. They're having a conversation, Marcus. Through the curriculum. I was standing at my kitchen window. The power line was visible against the gray February sky. No crows. Not yet. Why are you telling me this, Doug? Another pause. Longer this time. Because Andrea found the sublevel. My whole body went cold. I gripped the phone. The stairs Carla wrote about. The ones in the diagrams. Andrea found them. She says there's a door in the floor of the supply closet in room 6. It was always there, hidden under the carpet, under a layer of poured concrete that looks original but isn't. She pried it up on a Thursday night. There are stairs. They go down about 15 feet. And the rooms are there, Marcus. All 5 of them. Receiving. Assessment. Instruction. Demonstration. Transition. They're real. They're finished. They have desks and chairs and whiteboards and corkboards and they're clean. They're clean like Earl just mopped them. And room F. Doug didn't answer for 5 seconds. Room F has a door. The door is locked. Andrea says the lock isn't mechanical, it's not a deadbolt or a keyhole. It's a schedule. The door opens at a specific time and closes at a specific time, like the transition hour locks on the main building. But the schedule is longer. It isn't daily. What's the cycle? Andrea thinks it's tied to the instructors. 1 full cycle per placement. 2 years. The door opened for Carla. It opened for you. She thinks it's going to open for her. What's behind it? She doesn't know. But the lesson plans, your lesson plans, the ones you're still receiving, she thinks they're the curriculum for what happens inside Room F. And she thinks the 30 names on the roster aren't students. They're the previous occupants of your position. Every teacher who's been placed in Galton since 2004. And the enrollment isn't complete until all 30 are present. I counted. 11 placement teachers, Diane had said. I was the 11th. Doug, there have only been 11 of us. 11 of you who were placed through the program. But the building's been staffed since 1974. Before the program, the district hired directly. And before the district, the county ran the school. And before the county. He stopped. How many total? Andrea counted 29 names she could verify through district and county records going back to 1974. Some of them are dead. Some of them are alive and unreachable. Some of them are alive and still receiving the pages. She's been calling them. And I'm number 30. You're the last name on the roster, Marcus. I sat down. The chair was warm. The notebook was open on the table. A new page. A new lesson plan. And in the margin, in English, in my handwriting, 4 words I hadn't written. Enrollment closes at capacity. I looked at the page for a long time. Outside, the light was fading. It was 4:48 p.m. Doug. What does she want you to do? Andrea wants to open Room F. She says the curriculum is almost complete. She says the woman has been building toward this for 50 years and the only thing missing is full attendance. She wants me to help her contact the remaining names on the roster. And you're calling me because? I'm calling you because you're the only one who hasn't said yes. I asked him what the others had said. He told me. 26 of the 29 had been reached. 25 had agreed to return to Galton. Some of them had been receiving the pages for years. Some of them had been receiving them for decades. A woman named Patricia Olson, who had taught in Room 6 from 1981 to 1983, told Andrea that she had been waiting for this call since the day she left and that her bag had been packed by the door for 43 years. I asked about the 3 who couldn't be reached. Doug said 2 were dead. The 3rd was Carla Dunham. Carla's in Wichita, I said. Diane told me. Carla hasn't been in Wichita since 2022. Her apartment is vacant. Her phone is disconnected. The last activity on any of her accounts was a single transaction at a gas station in Wakini on the night she left Galton. Wakini. The same town where I stopped for gas on my way in. Doug, is Carla in the building? He didn't answer. Doug. Andrea says there are 30 desks in Room F, 29 are empty. 1 has a composition notebook on it. Open. The pages are full. The handwriting matches Carla's. I closed my eyes. I thought about Carla's last journal entry. There is no night shift and day shift. There is only one shift and we are taking turns being visible during it. I have been her the whole time. When, I said. The evening of March 21st. First day of spring. Andrea says the schedule aligns. The door will be open. And you think I should come? I think it doesn't matter what I think. The roster has your name on it. The attendance has you marked present. Your lesson plans are still being written. Whatever this is, Marcus, you're already enrolled. The only question is whether you walk into room F on your own or whether she finishes the curriculum without you and you spend the rest of your life hearing the writing through every floor you ever stand on. He was right about the writing. It had gotten louder. Not dramatically, incrementally, the way a sound increases when you're walking toward its source. The same measured rhythm. The same patient, angular strokes. It came through the floorboards of my apartment. It came through the tile floor of the bookstore. It came through the concrete sidewalk on Massachusetts Street. It was quieter during the day and louder after dark, but it never stopped entirely, and by March, I had begun to feel it in my feet even when I couldn't hear it. A vibration so low it was almost thermal. Like the earth underneath me was a desk, and something beneath it was taking notes. I told Doug I'd think about it. He said he understood. He said there was no pressure. Then he said, "She left the light on for you, Marcus. Room 6. Every night since you left. The same light. The same pulse. It's still going." He hung up. I put the phone down. I sat at the kitchen table. The notebook was open. The lesson plan was complete, objectives, procedures, assessment, everything. At the bottom of the page, below the assessment prompt, a single line in English. Class begins when the last student is seated. March 21st is tomorrow. My car is in the parking lot. The tank is full. The drive to Galton takes 7 hours. If I left at dawn, I'd arrive by early afternoon. I could walk through the town in daylight. I could see the school. I could sit in the cottage one more time. I could watch the sun set over the prairie and count the crows on the wire and wait for the east wing to light up and know, finally, what the pulse looks like from inside room 6 instead of through a curtain. I could walk down the stairs. I could sit at the 30th desk. I could open whatever lesson she has spent 50 years preparing. I could learn what she has been trying to teach. The notebook is on the table in front of me. The newest page is blank, the first blank page since December. As if the curriculum is complete. As if there is nothing left to prepare. As if the only remaining element is the physical presence of the last enrolled student in the assigned seat at the designated hour. I have the key to the east entrance in my pocket. I never returned it. Diane never asked for it. It is 10:47 p.m. The writing sound has stopped for the first time in 4 months. The silence is so total it feels architectural, like a room that has been cleared and cleaned and set with 30 chairs and is now simply waiting for the door to open and the lesson to begin. I haven't decided yet. But the bag is packed. And the notebook is in it. And the crows are on the wire, and they are facing west for the first time since I started counting, facing west, toward Galton, toward the school, toward room 6, toward whatever patient, ancient, unspeakable thing has been writing lesson plans in the dark for half a century and has finally, tonight, set down her pen. The silence is the loudest thing I've ever heard. I think it means she's ready for me to answer.